Good morning. I'd like to call the committee to order. One quick order of business. Senator Mason has asked that Senate Bill 1312 be passed by for the day, so we will not be hearing that one. Turning to our agenda this morning, I'd like to start the meeting with an update and presentation on tax conformity from the Secretary of Finance, Aubrey Lane. As you know, tax conformity is always one of the most complicated issues that we face every year, and we are constantly in a rush to get it done so that accountants and taxpayers will know how to file their forms. This year, it is even more complicated, so I think it is important that we get this presentation by the Secretary. But before we do that, I'd like the clerk to call the roll.
Senator Vogel, how do you vote?
Senator Vogel votes aye.
I'm not getting a screen here. Oh, now I am. There we go.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Secretary, please begin.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the invitation to be before you today. What I thought I would do is quickly go through some of the slides I shared with you during the last week's revenue update, because this has a significant impact on our revenues. But also to start with a little bit about what conformity is, because I've had several members give me calls, and I think I want to make sure everybody understands from where the administration is coming from when it talks about conformity. First of all, in its simplest form, when we call conformity, it's what we have at the state code here conforming to the federal code. I need to point out, this is not mandatory. As a matter of fact, Virginia could have its whole separate tax laws if it chose to. But as you mentioned earlier, Madam Chair, we tend to try to conform to the federal laws to make it easier for preparers and citizens in doing their tax returns at the both at the federal and the state level. But I do want to point out we have a long history of deconforming to many issues, particularly when they impact revenues. Now, there's also a couple types of conformity. We're what's called a fixed date conformity, meaning that every year you guys come in and vote to change the date of conformity. Usually you move that to the end of the fiscal year that we're in, the previous fiscal calendar year that we're in, so that it picks up all the changes that are made at the federal level. And typically over the years, for many years, that hadn't been much. There wasn't much going on with taxes at the federal level. But of course, starting a couple years ago with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and now these past year with both the CARES Act and the Consolidated Appropriations Act, there were significant changes at the federal level. And so therefore, if we don't move the fixed date from where we are now, which was December 31st of 2019, we wouldn't conform to any of the provisions in the current changes that happen at the federal level. As opposed to fixed date conformity, there is what's called rolling conformity, meaning instead of you guys having to take action to conform, then rolling conformity would mean you automatically conform each year. And of course, I believe in its wisdom, the Commonwealth has chosen to stay fixed dates, so it has an opportunity to look at these changes to make sure it doesn't whipsaw, whether up or down, the revenues for the Commonwealth of Virginia and its ability to deliver services. So just want to make sure people understood the differences between what's fixed date, where we are now, and what rolling conformity would do, because I know there has been a talk about that as we move forward. I should also point out, Madam Chair, you mentioned in your opening remarks that typically this is done very early in the session. It's done with an emergency clause, meaning 80% of the members have to vote positively for this to move forward. And that's obviously because of the significant impact it could have on revenues and to take effect quickly, again, to give some certainty to taxpayers and preparers. This year is a little different. Tax season's later than normally. The feds have announced that the tax window will not start until February 12th. So that is a couple of weeks past when it normally comes into play. Not that we should dally with trying to move forward on this, but I wanted to point out that we do have a little bit of time to work through this as we move forward. And there are some fairly significant, impactful items this year that need to be considered. So that's just a little background as to what conformity and what we're trying to accomplish. Next slide, please. I believe Tyler's the one doing this for me, so thank you. Yes. So in general, what the administration has recommended for this year, and we have to keep in mind, we did not have the Consolidation Appropriation Act in front of us. That was not delivered until December 27th. So our budgeted revenues and our legislation for conformity was given to you guys when the governor announced his budget on December, I think the 16th, not knowing what was going to happen in the Consolidated Appropriations Act. So we did not have that information when we looked at revenue projections nor the conformity bill. But in general, the administration's position has been, in recommendation to the General Assembly, to conform to most of the individual provisions in the CARES Act. That is the first stimulus act that was enacted at the beginning of this year. And then also carry that forward for the Consolidated Appropriations Act. Now, what you have in front of you are the provisions on this page of those acts, and there's quite a few more in both acts, but they don't have any revenue impact. And so therefore, we would assume we would conform to those. Many of them are administrative in nature. But these are the significant ones with revenue impact that we would suggest to the Northern Administration is suggesting that we conform to for individuals. The top half of that is the CARES Act provisions. And Madam Chair, in the legislation that you are carrying regarding conformity, this is considered, this impact is considered in that legislation and is in our budgeted revenues. So these individual provisions related to those few items, as you see the top third of the page, are reflected in our reduction in our budgeted revenues for the years 21 and 22 and are taken care of in the bill that you have in front of you right now. Now, subsequent to that, we received information on the Consolidated Appropriations Act with individual provisions. That's at the bottom half of the page here. We would also recommend that we conform to these provisions, and you can see the monetary impact of them. But that would have to require an amendment to the legislation and also a reduction in budgeted revenues of about $9 million in 2021 and $69.7 million in the second fiscal year of our current budget. But we have sent amendment language down for your review and would recommend to the General Assembly that we conform to these particular provisions. And I'm not going to go through all of them in detail, be happy to answer questions at the end, but these are primarily small business and individual provisions that the administration would recommend that we would conform to in this year's Conformity Act for the current legislative session. Next page, please. Now on this page are the major provisions where we would recommend not conforming to. And they particularly relate to business, with the exception of one, and that is the medical expense deduction, which I'll get to. But on the top half of this, these are business provisions that would allow businesses to carry back losses to previous years. Not just the year of 20, which we know were impacted by the COVID restrictions, but years 18 and 19. And as you all know, we're on a cash basis. This would significantly impact cash revenues for the current fiscal year and the next year by about $665 million. And therefore, the recommendation would be not to conform to those business provisions for loss carrybacks. I will mention the business interest deduction we do partially conform to. We conform to about 20%. this would increase it significantly. And since we had made that decision last year where we would conform to, we did not recommend additional conformity to the business interest deduction. These are temporary because these are cutting back on some of the provisions that were in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act in order to make that revenue impact at the federal level, both the pluses and minuses. So in their consideration when they passed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. So therefore, we do not recommend conformity here, and it's not in the bill that you have, Madam Chair, in front of you. Now, the provisions below this are the ones that came out in the CARES Act, the Consolidated Appropriations Act. The first one is the medical expense deduction. It is an itemized individual deduction. And the reason we're recommending nonconformity because the General Assembly last year chose to not conform to this provision. So therefore, we would just remain consistent with the previous year. Probably the one that has gotten the most attention, though, is deductibility of business expenses funded by PPP loan forgiveness. I've got some information more in detail as we go through this, but that is where an individual business has received initially a loan, has been forgiven, and therefore normally that would be taxed under the Consolidated Appropriations Act. They would not tax that under the CARES Act either, but under the CARES Act, they could not deduct the deductions. But that was changed under the Consolidated Appropriations Act to get taxable income not being taxed with the loan forgiveness, but also allowing deductions. And I'm going to go through this in much more detail because at my last meeting with you guys, you asked me to look at some options for this, but it's a fairly significant revenue hit. And I think obviously it is a double tax benefit, which we'll get into in a few minutes. We've projected here based on our analysis that it would be somewhere between 105 and 190 million in the current fiscal year and 150, 190 million for this particular provision, and 190 and 310 million in the second fiscal year of our budget. But Madam Chair, that is just assuming the loans that are currently in place. As you know, this is an ongoing program, and we need to consider that it could be as much as $900 million going forward if Virginia were to receive about the same distribution of PPP loans forgiveness that it did in the first CARES Act. So that would be a recommendation where we would not conform to those provisions of the Consolidated Appropriations Act. Next slide, please. Now, typically the things we look at when we don't consolidate are certainly the state revenue impact, but also tax policy and public policy. And I went through this briefly last week regarding the Paycheck Protection Program loan forgiveness. I want to make sure we're not talking about loans anymore. These are now become grants. And so we're not talking about taxing loans. We're talking about loans that were forgiven, which regenerate taxable income and therefore do not have to be repaid. So we're not talking about taxing a loan. I've heard that misconstrued several times. This is about a grant that would normally be taxed. And so if you take into account that tax treatment along with many of the businesses in the Commonwealth did not receive PPP loans, and I'll get into that in a few minutes. That is one of the reasons why, a couple of the reasons why we decided that it would not be appropriate to conform to this treatment at the Consolidated Appropriations Act. Next slide. I think this picture on the next slide will help point out what the tax impacts are of this particular program. Let me point out, first of all, that there were about $12.6 billion of loans, PPP loans in the program in Virginia. Now, about 113,000 companies received these loans. We have about 250,000 companies in the Commonwealth, a little bit more than that. So a substantial amount did not receive these loans. And so we have to keep in mind that all individuals and businesses that were impacted by COVID-19 did not receive these loans, now turned into grants. nor the favorable tax treatment. And what I've tried to show here is in the first column, that is typically what tax provisions are if in fact there is loan forgiveness. So assuming we had a PPP loan of $150,000 and individuals or businesses used $150,000 to pay for expenditures, you can see there's no cash impact for them. If the loan is forgiven, that would result in taxable income, but they could then deduct a deduction. So again, there was no tax impact to them. And that is the typical tax policy. In fact, our Rebuild Virginia program, where we've had $130 million thereabouts in grants given to small businesses, this is how they're going to be treated. They have to pay tax at the federal level on the grant, but they get to deduct the deductions. And therefore, no cash benefit or no tax benefit because, in fact, the federal government through this grant has paid for it. Now, when the CARES Act came out, that's the second column, we used the same example, $150,000 loan, expense funded by $150,000. Again, no cash out of pocket to the company or the individual. But the CARES Act said, well, we're not going to tax that loan forgiveness. But as a consequence, we're not going to let you deduct the expenses paid with it either. So same net effect as normal tax policy. Don't have to pay tax on the income of the loan forgiveness, but can't deduct the deductions. And therefore, that's the provision where Virginia did its budget based on, because that was the guidance by the IRS up until December 27th when the Consolidated Appropriations Act came out, which is the third column. And this is what that Consolidation Appropriations Act did. It said, okay, now you have a $150,000 loan. You've been able to pay your expenses. You have no cash out of pocket, but we're not going to let you, we're still not going to tax you on the income for the loan forgiveness. However, we're going to allow you to take these deductions now. So those individuals at the federal level or at companies now get a significant tax benefit of being able to deduct those deductions, not having to recognize the income. And I'll look at the last column here because this is some of the thinking of how we decided not to conform. There were all those businesses that didn't get a PPP loan that still had to pay those expenses. They had to pay them out of pocket. And yes, they should get to deduct them, but now we're giving the same treatment to a business that did not get these loans forgiven, had to go through the traditional route, didn't get them paid for by the federal government, and now we're asking for a state benefit on top of that, an extra tax benefit what these others are not getting. So that was the reason for the nonconformity related to the PPP loans from the state standpoint. I will point out also that the program was continued going forward, and there was an RTD article, and the main reason it was continued, not only for the impacts, but for those many minority and small businesses that didn't get this loan in the past. In fact, they're going to smaller banks as we move forward to make sure that smaller businesses and individuals get those. So that is the original reason why we issued the recommended nonconformity. Next slide, please. However, at the last meeting and talking with the chair here, there was an effort to see if we could reach some way to move forward by allowing some of these this tax treatment to be allowed at the state level, because we do know that some of the smaller businesses and individuals were impacted and did get this. Now, we've looked at this a couple of different ways. If you go to the SBA website, they do break it down by industry and they do break it down by loan size. In Virginia, roughly about the average loan size was about $107,000. And I've got a slide on that going forward. That's a little bit more than what was at the national level average, but just for general purposes, the average loan was about $107,000. We looked at whether or not we could break it down by industry, and the problem with that is that, number one, you're picking winners and losers between some industries, and we know, like for instance, restaurants were significantly impacted by this, but not all restaurants, because many that specialized in takeout have done better than those that haven't. Likewise, most construction companies have done okay because they were deemed essential workers. However, there were some that didn't do okay. So we thought it would be a better approach to look at some type of limitation on the deduction in an effort to try to move forward in helping those smaller businesses. Now, a couple of other things to keep in mind here. It's when we would allow the deduction, the way the law works is that when the business has deemed or the individual has deemed it's met the criteria for loan forgiveness, then the deduction could be taken. So that could happen in 20 or 21, and therefore that's a decision would need to be made whether or not you would allow the deduction as one time in the current fiscal year or the second year. And of course, that's complicated whether or not individuals put their or businesses put their income taxes on extension. But nonetheless, we've looked at it this way and feel like this is a more appropriate way if there is a desire to give a deduction for this. A better way to look at this is based on loan size, because in effect, we're treating all taxpayers the same way. We're just limiting their deduction as we go forward and trying to help those that are in the smaller businesses. Next slide. Now, this is looking at, if you look at the loans, both from a corporate and a non-corporate or individual basis, this gives you an idea of the distribution. As you can see, 80% of the loans were $100,000 or less. So most of the people that got these loans were in that $100,000 and less going forward. And then we've broken it down by 50,000, 25,000, or 10,000, and also determining whether you want to extend this to businesses or just to individuals. And we've broken it out that way to give you an idea of how these loans could be looked at in terms of some type of breaking down a deduction related to the loan forgiveness. So if you go to the next slide, please. So we've looked at a deduction amount starting at 100,000, 50,000, 25,000, and 10,000. Another thing to keep in mind is, as I mentioned before, the timing of the qualified loans. Do we allow them for the current tax year only, or do we allow them to go forward in the future because the program's continuing and many people may extend their programs? And by the way, this is not a timing difference. It's a permanent difference. This is whatever we do here will not be made up in coming years because of a situation turning around. This is lost revenue or additional income taxes to the taxpayer regardless of the decision we do. So it's not a timing difference. And the final thing we'd ask you to keep in mind is who would be the qualifying taxpayers? Do you want to expand it to corporate entities, or do you want to limit to individual income tax individuals? So we've broken it down that way for you also. So if you go to the next page, here we start to break down if we allowed a deduction for a PPP loan forgiveness in the current tax year, 2020 only, this would be the impact depending on how many of the individual loans you choose to cover. If you went to the $100,000 level and both wanted corporate and individual for tax year 21, or for the current, fiscal year 21, it would be somewhere between $56 and $74 million. And for 22, $42 million and $78 million. If we just wanted to do individuals, you can see we've broken that out below also for the current fiscal year. The reason you see more in the corporate in the second year, many of them are not on a calendar year basis, and most individuals pay their income tax by May the 1st, is what's required by our law. And they've broken it down by 50,000, it's 25,000 and 10,000. And keep in mind, this would only be for 2020. If you go to the next slide, please. If you chose to allow this to go forward, in other words, continuing to go forward with the program continuing at the federal level, 21 doesn't change, but you can see the amounts go up in 2022 because the loan program continues. Now, for your deliberations, I would suggest that the lower amounts are probably the ones that are more accurate. And let me explain that. In other words, if you look at the $50,000 threshold for 2021, and you wanted to do corporate and individual, I would suggest to you the $39 million is closer to the amount than the 51 million. And that's because of the estimates we have to make. The reason being is we have to assume that everybody will be able to use these deductions. And we base these estimates on what adjusted gross income was in the previous year. We know that many companies will not have that same adjusted gross income and will not be able to use these deductions even if we allow them. And so therefore, the lower amount is probably more indicative of what our actual revenue loss would be, depending on how the pleasure of the General Assembly would be to conform to a portion of these deductions for this loan forgiveness. And so, Madam Chair, that concludes the presentation. If you go to the next slide, just summarizing the PPP loans, I would suggest, though, whatever treatment we do for the PPP loans, that we do for the Rebuild Virginia loans. This was in response to many small businesses not getting the PPP loans. Even though we can't fix it for them at the federal level, I would assume that we would want to treat them the same. There was not nearly the amount of those loans. There were 12.6 billion of PPP loans could be forgiven, only 120 million in Rebuild Virginia grants, and therefore the impact would be about $4.5 million if we allowed the entire $100,000 limitation. So I would suggest that we can whatever we do, we treat them consistently as we go forward. And Madam Chair, that completes my presentation, and would suggest to you that the administration is willing to work with the General Assembly on how we move this forward in this regard to these PPP loans.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Are there questions for Aubrey?
Madam
Yes,
Chair.
Senator Peterson.
Aubrey, first of all, thank you as always for a comprehensive presentation. A couple comments and then a question. One is you're absolutely correct. Not every business applied for a PPP loan. I think you omitted a couple facts though. One is that a lot of businesses were shut down for several months. That's one of the reasons why the PPP program was extended, because businesses by government mandate were closed. So I think it's worth noting that this was done in reaction to that. It didn't happen in a vacuum. Secondly, one of the reasons why businesses didn't apply for PPP loan because they just closed. Some closed for months and then reopened. Some closed and never reopened. So that's one reason. The other reason is smaller businesses, particularly sole proprietors, probably figured it just wasn't worth the time and paperwork to go through it. So that's just one point I'd make. And we've talked about this privately. I'm not crazy about just using the dollar threshold as opposed to focusing on those businesses that were actually shut down, particularly retail, mom and pop, bricks and mortar businesses that were physically shut down. And I understand exactly why it's hard to locate those. But boy, I really wish we could, because if we just do it as a blanket deduction grant, essentially a grant or allowing a blanket deduction, you're rewarding everybody, including people that may have actually broken even or made money in 2020. And so I just wish, and again, I know my colleagues are going to have thoughts on this, there was some way we could target those businesses that were actually shut down. And again, it's a tax deduction, so they have to make money in order to benefit from it. But I just wish there was some way to really target those businesses that lost revenue as a result of the shutdown. So I'll wait to hear from my colleague.
Got it.
Senator Newman was next, then Senator Sasla.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Aubrey, thank you for this. It is really a good starting place, and it's, I think, exactly what the committee asked for, and there may be other opportunities. But I guess I think I know the answer, but on page 10 or 9, it's the same thing, is when you look at the $100,000 threshold, if a company was at the $100,000 and won, $100,001, does that mean that they qualify under your numbers for $100,000, or they don't qualify at all? It's just how is the math working there?
Yeah, Senator Newman, they would qualify for $100,000. So if you got a $5 million loan, you're still going to get a $100,000 deduction.
Great. Madam Chairman, thank you.
Thank you. Senator Sasla.
Aubrey, thank you. You threw a lot of numbers at us. Let me ask you something. It seems to me that if you were to say that the forgiven, loan is in fact, revenue, income revenue, then it would be inconsistent not to allow then the expense deduction. Without making exceptions, if you got that loan and the loan was forgiven, which now puts it in a revenue situation, and allowed the deduction of the whole thing since it was given to employees as salaries, what would be the impact on the budget?
Well, Senator Cecil, that's the way the budget has been contemplated. That remember, the CARES Act said that you weren't going to tax the income, but you couldn't take the deductions. Conversely from that, your example, it's the same thing. You tax the income and take the deduction. So we at Impact said there was going to be no impact on the revenues for the Commonwealth. What the Consolidated Appropriations Act did was to say, now you have income, but we're still going to let you to take those deductions. And that's why the significant reduction in revenue related to that Consolidated Appropriations Act, because in your example, and that's the first two tables I put on those slide showing that if you were matching up the loan forgiveness and the income with the deductions, there would be no impact. Of course, they'd been paid for by federal government in this particular case. But what the Consolidated Appropriations Act is that we've paid for it and we're still going to let you take the deductions. That was not contemplated when we did the budget, and therefore that would be, if we allow the entire amount, as much as $900 million going forward. So what we tried to do is to say in these examples, Senator Saslaw, if you limited it to these varying amounts, what would be the impact on revenues?
Okay.
But that's the problem. We have a disconnect between how our budget was, revenues were done based on guidance as of December 26th and the normal treatment of these versus what the Consolidated Appropriations Act allowed if we were to conform to it. And by the way, I just want to reiterate again, these taxpayers have got a significant benefit at the federal level. So we're only talking about the state level here. While it's significant to our revenues, and I cannot say it's not significant to some of these taxpayers, because I don't want to be seen as not being, understanding that they've been impacted. Senator Peterson's comment, yes, some were closed, but I would also say some were closed that didn't get this loan. And they couldn't get it not only because they were closed, but as you know, it was reported across the nation, a lot of these monies, 50% of them went to 5% of the companies, the larger companies that got these. So in addition to not being able to get them, there was a disconnect as to the size of company that was able to get these loans. And many of them didn't get them because the loans had been exhausted by the time they got in the queue. So Senator, I hope that answers your question.
Okay.
Senator Hanger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Secretary Lane, for the most part, I agree with the direction you're going. You made some remarks last week relative to the policy and the equity in what you're all suggesting, and also the fact that perhaps there need to be some targeted initiatives to the ones who actually experience the hit from COVID. And so, first question, relative to where you're at, have you considered, like in a decision matrix, where you would compare 2020 revenues to 2019 revenues as one of the limiting factors? And also, it appears, and some of the conversation here with the business is impacted, they won't have tax liability. I think if we perhaps can address this in our conformity bill, but there may need to be some targeted initiative standalone apart from our tax policy that would actually basically be able to stimulate these types of businesses in some way. Is that a part of your decision process?
Yes, sir. A couple comments, and I've got Kristen. I know Kristen Collins is on the line from tax to answer. The first part of your question is whether we could look at revenues from a previous year. Unfortunately, our records are on adjusted gross income. We don't have revenues when we get the data from the federal government. So we don't have a database we can go to determine if there's been a reduction in revenue. Adjusted gross income, of course, the problem with that, and I had this conversation, Senator Peterson and I mean, there's a lot of things that affect the adjusted gross income other than profitability, loss carry forwards, other deductions that are allowed. So looking at that makes it difficult for us to determine if a company has been impacted by this or other tax policy issues. So that's one of the problems when we start looking at it by loss of revenue. It's a compliance issue, whether we could actually even look at that to determine if that company qualified or not.
Madam Chair,
Senator Hanger.
on that point, before you continue, it seems to me a lot of the small businesses that we're talking about would be operating with Schedule Cs, where you would have all that information, individual proprietorships and partnerships. Is that correct?
Sir, that could be the case, except we'd have to build a table for it. And in that regard, in other words, our runs don't automatically pull that out and say we can go access it. I'm not saying we can't get there, Senator. I'm just saying from a compliance standpoint, roughly we're just going to have to take the taxpayer's word, I think, is the end result of that. And I'm not suggesting if we limit it to a certain amount, quite frankly, we shouldn't do that anyway in some respects. So, but that's the problem when you start looking across industries. How we have that data that we can actually look at it and make those decisions. I agree with you wholeheartedly. A better way to deal with this is not through tax policy, but through direct help of the companies. That is the primary purpose why, two reasons, the Rebuild Virginia loans were expanded, and also a lot of the money that went to the localities, they were used to do small business help also. And of course, they don't get these tax treatments either. They'll have to get to deduct the expenditures, but we'll have to recognize that grant. So I couldn't agree more, Senator, that tax policy is very difficult to use to incentivize other than to try to get money to businesses. I mean, I understand that side of it.
Thank you.
Senator Barker.
Yes, Mr. Secretary, a couple perspectives on things and get your reaction on sort of how we might tackle it. Would an alternative to providing the double taxation benefit by including the deductions for the expenditures, would it be better to target this relief to those who have got the Rebuild Virginia loans, since they're not getting the same benefit as to those who got the PPP loans on the loans themselves? And are there ways in which we could, other than just capping it at a certain dollar level, whether it's at 10,000 or 100,000 or whatever, to be able to get this targeted relief, either through tax policy or through other actions that would direct it towards those entities that are losing money or have had a substantial reduction in profitability over this year compared to the previous year?
Two parts of your question, Senator Barker, Madam Chair. Certainly, we know what the universe of Rebuild Virginia is, and we could certainly limit it to that. I would point out, though, Rebuild Virginia, as I mentioned earlier, we can't do anything for at the federal level. They're taxed at the federal level, and that's where the significant hit is. At Virginia, we're talking, while it's a great deal, and overall, we're talking around 6% for most people. So the people have already got the significant federal benefit from this. And I'm not, again, just pointing out facts, not trying to pejoratize any one way or the other. But we certainly could do that. And that's the reason why we increased the Rebuild Virginia program, because many people did not get this PPP loan. In terms of the targeting the loss to looking at people that lost money, again, that gets back into an analysis of was it from profitability because of lack of sales, or was it because of loss carry forwards, or was it because of other issues that related to it? Now, I'm not suggesting that there haven't been a lot of individuals and companies that have been hit and because of lost profits, they're down. There's no, I mean, obviously common sense tells us that. The question is when we get into the tax database, other than taking the taxpayer's word for it, and that is always one issue that we could go to, I don't see how we could do any compliance. And I don't know how that we would be able to then estimate to you the impact from doing it that particular way, other than to say that everybody that got it's going to have to take it and therefore probably overestimate the impact to revenues. So it's not a matter of not wanting to, it's a matter of how we give you information to make a good decision, Senator Barker. The only way I know that we can give you pretty accurate information is if we have a dollar amount to work with.
Are there further questions? Thank you again, Mr. Secretary. While you were listing options that we had, it occurred to me that a full committee meeting really is not the best way to reach those decisions. So I'm going to put together a working group to look at the options, and hopefully you'll be available to work with them, and I'm sure you will be, to come back to us at our next meeting on Tuesday with recommendations. And the people I would like to appoint to this working group are Senators Barker, Normand, Peterson, Newman, Locke, and myself. So by next Tuesday, hopefully we will have resolved some of these issues and be able to give the committee several recommendations. I believe that's all on conformity. So we now have a very long docket and a very short amount of time, about an hour and a half. And so I will go through our docket, and I would ask that the patrons who have come here with minimal fiscal impact and maximal agreement from the full committees to please be brief. So let's start with Senate Bill 1279, Senator Bell.
Hi, Madam Chair. I'm working on my video here. Hopefully you can hear me now.
Can hear you.
Thank you. This is a administration bill, comes from the Department of Veterans Services, and it's to develop a comprehensive program to assist military members, veterans, their spouses making a successful transition from military to civilian life in the Commonwealth. As you know, we love keeping veterans here, good citizens, good skills. It's been a real positive thing, and it's part of our drive to be the #1 state for veterans. And this bill really just works to promote strategy services, connecting transitioning service members, veterans, spouses to employment opportunities, good place to live, interns, apprenticeships. I could tell you an experience I had when I was at a camping ground last year. A young lady walked over to me, and we were just having a conversation, and she mentioned that she was a nuclear submarine technician in Virginia and wanted to know if she possibly would have any kind of job opportunities when she separated. And I said, oh my God, yes. And was able to make a phone call or two. And before she knew it, she had a couple of great offers in front of her because she had tremendous skills, high security clearance, very trusted individual, a person we definitely want to stay in the Commonwealth for sure. So this bill is basically just something that will allow us, the Department of Veterans Services, to do this. According to the department, the proposed legislation is not anticipated to have a physical impact on agency operations, and it basically just gives them a bit more leeway to do better things for our veterans. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you have. And I don't know if the secretary or anybody
well, we are in something of a rush.
Okay, got you.
Are there any questions? Is there a motion on the bill?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Lisa.
This is Lisa.
Yes.
I think there was a very, very technical line amendment that needed to be adopted for the bill, just to get the resolution in proper form.
Okay, is there a motion on the
moved.
It's been moved and seconded that the technical amendment be agreed to. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay.
Oh, Madam Chair, I'm sorry, I was on Senator Bell's wrong bill. I apologize.
Okay, then we'll
so
undo
sorry.
that. We'll undo the technical amendment. Okay, all in favor of reporting Senate Bill 1279, indicate.
Senator Vogel, how do you vote?
Senator Vogel votes aye.
Ayes 16, no 0.
Ayes 16, no 0. The bill's reported. Okay, Senator Bell, you have SJ 297.
This is a constitutional amendment, and I will tell you briefly what brought this up. This would provide tax-free to veterans retreats, wounded warriors, and in particular one that is in my area called Willing Warriors Retreat. And we had an unfortunate incident where this retreat, which I was a part of for the last 5 years, they were able to build more capacity for veterans. They were worried when they first opened, would people want to come there, and they come there at no cost, and they're typically coming straight from Walter Reed, and this is a great respite for them and their families to try to get them to move on. When they're now flooded with people, Pentagon Credit Union funded building another house on their property, and they still have a waiting list of over 1,000 veterans now. Their tax bill from Prince William County this year went from $6,000 to $24,000. And we've tried to work to get some sort of a relief and waiver. We haven't been able to get that. I know the counties have the ability to do that, but this bill would say when counties don't do the right thing, it would go ahead and exempt them. There aren't that many around the Commonwealth, and in the fiscal impact, it would be an impact to the localities. Many already grant them a waiver. There are a few there that are listed as an impact, but I would argue that this is a small price for our veterans who are wounded, sometimes seriously disabled.
Thank you. I understand. We are the committee of origin of this bill, so we will take public testimony. Is there anyone signed up?
If those who would like to speak could please digitally raise their hands.
Madam Chair, the one, if we could get Shirley Dominic, she's the founder of the Willing Warriors who's gone through this, if her name is in there.
Okay. Let's hear first from those in favor. Is there anyone signed up for in favor?
Shirley Dominic. Shirley Dominic, please go ahead.
Hello, good morning, and thank you all for having me. I am the founder, co-founder, my husband and I both founded the Willing Warrior, and that was back in 2012. In 2015, this retreat home, which was built back in 1977, the community came around us with this project, and we renovated it at a tune of about $1.5 million worth of work that the community came in and made this 11,000 square foot house handicap accessible. And we had a ribbon cutting back in 2015. Since then, we've hosted over 1,400 warriors and families, and they're coming from Walter Reed, Fort Belvoir. This is a place of respite for them. We had no idea that when we were given a grant of $300,000 from Pentagon Federal back in 2017, and we did the ribbon cutting in 2018 on the second property, that our taxes was going to escalate. And as a small nonprofit, it is very difficult, very challenging. I can tell you firsthand, I sit with the warriors weekly when they come in with their family. This retreat home is a need for them. It is so critical for life-death situation, marriages, just to give them a place that they can call, home, to have what we say, a taste of home. And so the community at large, I have seen, come in spades and just help out where they can, but we do need a relief from these taxes. It is very difficult for us at this time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in favor?
Katie Boyle.
I believe she's in opposition. Is there anyone else in favor?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay. Anyone in opposition?
Katie Boyle, please go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm Katie Boyle with the Virginia Association of Counties, and appreciated the correspondence with the patron about this measure and certainly the good intentions that he brings to it. We sent a letter to the committee outlining some of our concerns with this measure. We do believe that the current local option process to provide relief to nonprofits is appropriate. It properly vests these decisions about local revenues with local governing bodies who are able to equip all the factors that may go into the decisions about granting this relief. And so we think the current process works well. If the committee would like to move forward with this measure, we would suggest perhaps that it could be considered in the special tax policy subcommittee that the chair is putting together. And so we appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Neil Manx.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair.
Good morning.
Neil Manx, representing Virginia Municipal League. And I'd like to talk a little bit about the process. The process today provides property tax relief for nonprofit organizations, including veterans groups. This was a process that was ratified by Virginia voters in 2002 to amend the state constitution to transfer the authority for granting property tax exemptions to localities. It's a process that the General Assembly itself in 2003 passed HB 1750, establishing section 58.1-3651 of the code. The old process required state legislation to pass by supermajorities of 3/4 each for each chamber. We think that today's process is more streamlined, provides greater certainty for the applicant, and provides a voice for other taxpayers in the process because there's public notice and public hearings, as well as a majority vote required by the local governing board to pass the ordinance. The code side I mentioned includes several factors that are of interest, I think, to the General Assembly that the applicant must meet. First is it recognized by the IRS as a 501c? If the organization serves alcohol, does it have a current ABC license? If there's compensation paid to any employee of the organization, is it in excess of a reasonable allowance? Are any net earnings plowed back into the organization to provide services that provide a common good for the public? And lastly, to examine what is the revenue impact to the locality and to its taxpayers by exempting the property. We don't believe that or actually we do believe that the current process is working. We recognize that not everyone is happy, but that's not the point. The point is that this process is fair, it's understandable, and it's reasonable. And we don't know, we really, I don't think that a constitutional amendment is necessary for a single situation that really should be resolved at the local level. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Edwards?
Yes, Madam Chairman, following up on what Neil talked about, I always have a question when it comes to taxation exemptions. Is this necessary? Because we have a lot of exemptions, and I'm gathering from Neil, we don't really need this because we're already doing this. There's a process to do it. I want to thank the young lady who's providing veteran services. Anything to help the veterans is, I think, a good thing, but I'm not sure we need it.
Thank you. Senator Deeds?
Madam Chair, I was going to say that Neil Manx has a nice beard, number one. But number two, I think he's exactly right, so is Senator Edwards. This is a worthy project, but we can't second guess every local government when it comes to granting these tax exemptions. And I'm going to make a motion to PBI the bill unless the chair has another approach she'd like to take.
No, but we need a second. It's been moved and seconded that SJ 297 be PBI'd. Please record your vote.
Senator Vogel, how do you vote? Senator Vogel, how do you vote?
Senator Vogel votes aye.
Ayes 15, noes 1.
Ayes 15, noes 1. The bill is PBI'd. Next up is Senator Boysko with Senate Bill 1387. And she'll be followed by Senator Favola with Senate Bill 1300. Okay. We have not been able to locate Senator Boysko, so next up is Senator Favola. And after Senator Favola is Senator Hashmi. Good morning, Senator Favola.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Hope you're doing well.
Doing
My bill is Senate Bill 1300, and it is... My bill is Senate Bill 1300. It is a Section 1 bill. I worked with advocates and actually the Sheriff's Association. What this bill does is it directs the Board of Local and Regional Jails to convene a group of stakeholders to actually look at the services and the level of care that's provided to pregnant inmates. That's the intent of the bill. A report is required to come to the chair of the Senate Committee on Judiciary and the Senate Committee on Rehab and Social Services, the respective House committees, by July 1, 2022. So we wanted to ensure there was plenty of time to really do an adequate review. And then we also have a sentence in there that the board should adopt regulations consistent with the findings of the report. We think this would be a wise thing. As you know, last year a bill passed that required the Department of Corrections to issue a regulation on the standards of care in this area for the state-run prisons.
Are there questions for Senator Favola? This bill has come from another committee, so we will not take public comment. Is there a motion on the bill?
Move to report.
It's been moved and seconded that Senate Bill 1300 be reported. Please record your vote.
Senator Vogel, how do you vote?
Senator Vogel votes aye.
Ayes 16, no 0.
Ayes 16, no 0. The bill's reported.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Next up is Senator Hashmi with Senate Bill 1188, and then Senate Bill 1314.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Senate Bill 1188 is a bill that is going to establish basically a farm-to-food banks process. This bill enables the Commissioner of Agriculture to provide funding to food banks and other similar organizations to buy food directly from our Virginia farmers and producers, and the governor's proposed budget includes $600,000 to establish the program. The program will bring more food to the approximately 1.2 million Virginians who are now facing a serious crisis of food insecurity, while also supporting our agricultural industry. And it seeks to mitigate the economic hardships of COVID-19 and create an infrastructure to serve Virginia farmers and food insecure residents. This structure will basically provide funding to charitable food assistance organizations and covers farmers and food producers' costs, which tend to stand in the way of serving the communities. And mostly these costs are associated with harvesting, processing, packaging, and transportation. And therefore, if we can remove this barrier, we will be successful in helping to feed hungry families in Virginia. This bill has support from many area stakeholders and is especially supported by our Virginia farmers. And I hope the committee will consider supporting this amendment.
Senator Hanger, you have a comment? Oh. Okay. Are there questions for Senator Hashmi? Yes, Senator Ruff.
In the notes from the staff, it says that we have a tax credit since 2016, which has not been used very much, and they thought it might be, we want to consider repealing that existing tax credit if we're going to pass this. So I would move that we amend this bill to include that.
Is there a second? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Is there a second to? It's been moved and seconded that the amendment to repeal the existing tax credit.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
That tax credit, I think, was my bill. And I'm just surprised and disappointed it's not being used very much.
Yeah. Okay, we have a motion to repeal the existing tax credit as an amendment. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. Let's, I believe the ayes had it. Yes.
I do have a question about that particular initiative as far as, and maybe our council could help us as far as whether or not that would actually be an appropriate amendment to repeal the tax credit in the body of this bill.
Are either, Madam Chair, I would ask that either Lisa or Connor, depending on who's on this morning, respond.
Madam Chair, this is Connor from DLS, and I think if Senator Hanger's question is whether the amendment would be germane to the title of the bill is introduced, just named this program that is being created, the Virginia Agriculture Food Assistance Program and Fund. So if you take that in isolation, it doesn't have, anything to do with this existing tax credit. If you think about it in terms of like a broader concept, they are related to the same policy issue. But those sorts of germaneness questions are up to you, Madam Chair, and not sort of something that there is a definitive legal answer to.
Thank you so much.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
While I'm respectful of the issue that Senator Hanger raises, I appreciate the candor of DLS because they should not be ruling on germaneness, and either the committee chairs or the president makes those decisions during the legislative process. We can't delegate that responsibility.
How about we report the bill, but refer the question of the tax credit to the special study committee, tax policy? Okay, people are nodding their heads, so The motion has been withdrawn. Could we have a motion then on the bill?
Move to report the bill.
It's been moved and seconded that Senate Bill 1188 be reported.
Madam Chair, I'll go ahead and vote. I had a question.
Yes. Strike the board, Senator Hanger.
Sorry to be slow on that. Just a clarification, will this money flow primarily through the food banks? Is that the intent? Because we support the food banks, and it's not named specifically, but they would be in the line of determination in most instances, it would seem.
Is the question directed to me?
Yes.
Okay, Madam Chair and Senator Hanger, yes, the charitable organizations will be receiving the funding, and they will be distributing it to the farmers then as they support the process of purchasing and transporting the food products.
Senator Norman.
It just occurred to me, if the funding is going to the charitable organizations, are they going to be able to impose an administrative cost on any of that money?
I'm sorry, Madam Chair and Senator, I couldn't quite hear the question. Are they going to impose what?
Madam Chairman, my question is that if the money is going to the charitable organizations, are they going to be able to impose an administrative cost on those funds for implementing the intent of the bill?
I believe that is the case, but if we could hear from one of our experts who's online, that would be helpful.
Madam Chair, this is Connor from
Yes.
DLS, and to speak to Senator Norman's question, if you're looking at lines 48 through 50 of the bill, this describes what the grants can be used for. Specifically, lines 49 to 50, there's a series of things that are listed there in terms of what would be eligible. Thinking about Senator Norman's question with respect to administrative costs, I guess the question would be whether that could be fit into something like processing or packaging. But I think that because it's that question of whether administrative costs are eligible for under the grant or not isn't specifically addressed in the statutory text, the committee could either amend the bill to say, yes, can be used for administrative costs, or no, they can't. If it's left as it is, then it would just be up to VDAC's interpretation of the statute.
Madam Chairman.
Yes, Senator Newman. Excuse me, Norman.
I'm flattered. Rather than doing this on the fly, I think maybe we'll wait and deal with it on the floor, and I can get with DLS and do it a little more responsibly.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a motion to report the bill. Please signify your vote.
Senator Vogel, how do you vote?
Senator Vogel votes aye.
Aye 16.
Mr. Clerk, if I might
zero.
ask for, I made an error on Senator Bell's previous bill. I intended to vote no on the motion to PBI. If you could please correct that vote for me.
Will do, ma'am.
Thank you very much.
So Senate Bill 1188 is reported by a vote of 16 to nothing. Senator Hashmi, you also have Senate Bill 1314.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Senate Bill 1314 is going to establish an Office of Education and Labor Market Alignment in order to coordinate the data analysis of workforce and higher education needs that we have, and also to make sure that we are effectively translating data so that we can serve the expanding needs of workforce in various sectors of the Virginia economy. So the data generated by this office will provide us with insights that empower policymakers and our educators to make efficient and effective decisions, and especially to create curricular programs, certification programs, degree programs that will lead to credentialed and skilled workers to meet our expanding needs. This particular legislation is supported by a variety of stakeholders, including Chambers of Commerce, SHEV, and VEDP. It is going to establish a partnership between SHEV and institutions of higher education, the Employment Commission, Go Virginia, VEDP, to effectively align our workforce needs and the opportunities for higher education that we are providing to Virginians. And I ask for the support of the committee.
Thank you. Are there questions for the senator? Okay, this bill has been referred to us from another committee, so we won't take public comment. Is there a motion on the bill?
Move to report.
It's been moved and seconded that Senate Bill 1314 be reported. Please record your vote.
Senator Vogel, how do you vote? Senator Vogel, how do you vote?
Senator Vogel votes aye.
Ayes 14, noes 2.
Ayes 14, noes 2. The bills are reported.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Next is Senator Kiggins, Senate Bill 1191. I don't know if she is here.
Madam Chair, she's on the Zoom.
Okay, thank you. As we talked about earlier, Senator Kiggins, we thought perhaps what we should do is PBI this bill, but include language in the budget for a work group to come up with some solutions for us. Is that your understanding?
Yes, Madam Chair, and I know we previously spoke in committee just about the direction of the bill, and I would very much appreciate the opportunity to turn this issue into a work study. There's a lot of unanswered questions, and especially about the fiscal impact. So I think that would be the best way to proceed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think you know, I hope you know, I'm totally with you on this. We just have to get it done somehow.
I appreciate that very much.
Is there a motion then to PBI? It's been moved and seconded the bill be PBI'd. Please record your vote.
Text me. With a letter? All right, text me. Thanks, okay, bye. Yeah.
Senator Vogel, how do you vote?
Senator Vogel votes aye.
Ayes 16, no 0.
Ayes 16, no 0. The bill's defeated, but we will work on some budget language.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Next up is, did we already PBI? No, we passed by for the day, Senate Bill 1312, so we'll get that at the next meeting. Next is Senator McPike with Senate Bill 1254.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Senate Bill 1254 is a follow-up to the sports betting bill that we passed last year. It is a sort of a technical fix on a number of different issues that lottery wanted us to address. It clearly cleans up definitions of amateur sports as well as allows a definition for Olympics. This is something we thought we had in the original bill, but the General Counsel at lottery sort of had some different opinions. So we provided cleanup language on that, Madam Chair. It also makes it clear that casinos can have a kiosk and or a waging counter in their premise and not just a mobile sports betting bill. I think that was our intent from both the casino bill last year as well as the sports mobile betting, but it was language that was missed, so we want to make sure it's very clear to lottery that is allowed. It also clarifies that our intention was the the 4 additional licenses sort of designated for basically the casinos, the Bristol, Danville, Norfolk, and Portsmouth did not count towards the overall cap limit, so there's language in that adjusts that appropriately, and then changes the $250 million to $300 million dollar threshold to align the sports betting statute required of casino operators under the current law. So, Madam Chair, those are the items, and we do have a substitute, I believe, as well, that confirms those.
It's been moved and seconded that the substitute be adopted. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. I see Senator Norman had a question.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. If Senator McPike would be kind enough to refresh my fading recollection, in the legislation last year, did we pick up collegiate sports?
So, Madam Chair, the legislation as passed in conference committee excluded betting on Virginia collegiate sports. That is still consistent with this bill. So there's no change in that regard.
Senator Norman.
But it would, and I just don't remember, so I'm not being argumentative with you. But it allowed betting on collegiate sports outside of Virginia.
Madam Chair, that is correct.
Madam Chair.
Senator Norman.
On this business about casinos, was it also contemplated last year that the sports betting would be allowed within the casinos and that it would not count towards the total licenses to be issued?
Madam Chair, I'd say that's correct. That's how we had interpreted in committee and through the process. However, lottery interpreted that differently, and so this also cleans that up to make sure that's very clear.
Madam Chairman.
Senator Peterson.
Yes, Madam Chair. Senator McPike, I notice on lines 174 to 176, you're striking the 12 permit limitation. Is that being moved someplace else, or is that just we're getting rid of that whole policy?
So, Madam Chair, I'd respond to the Senator that it's exactly the point that Senator Norman just brought up. It's clarifying that the licenses designated towards the casinos did not count towards the overall limit. And so that connects those two and ensures it's very clear to the lottery on how that's applied.
So, follow-ups?
Yes, Senator Peterson.
So we still have a limit on the number of licenses?
That's correct.
Okay.
Are there further questions?
Madam Chair, I have a follow-up question.
Yes, Senator Norman.
This may be too much in the weeds. Were any pro formas or takeoffs done on what projected revenues would be for wagering on intercollegiate sports outside of Virginia?
Madam Chair, I do not have that projection, although I just note to the committee that licenses have been issued, and so the data is starting to come in now. So licenses 2 or 3 have been issued, and I think more this week. And as a quick comment, Madam Chair, I'd just like to congratulate the Virginia Lottery. We put a very aggressive schedule, and the goal was to meet and have applicants in the market before Super Bowl, and they have achieved that, and they're continuing to issue additional licenses, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
We are the Committee of Origin for this bill, so is there anyone in the public desiring to speak on this?
If members of the public could raise their hand if they wish to speak. Madam Chair, I'm seeing no hands raised.
What'd you say? She said that she's on it. Oh, okay, thank you. Okay, then is there a motion on the bill?
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Senator Edwards.
To the Speaker, is there great demand that people to bet on amateur sports like the Olympic sports? I never thought anybody did that. Is that what this is?
Madam Chair, that is correct. The original legislation last year, we had language that allowed for Olympic sports betting. The General Counsel had a different interpretation. So, Madam Chair, this language and substitute clears that up to make sure it is identified as such.
Is there a further question? Is there a motion on the bill? Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded that Senate Bill 1254 be reported. Please record your vote.
Senator Vogel, how do you vote? Senator Vogel, how do you vote?
Senator Vogel is not on the Zoom anymore.
Copy that, thank you. Ayes 10, noes 4, 1 abstention.
Ayes 10, noes 4, 1 abstention. The bill's reported. Next, Senator McPike, you have 1305.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senate Bill 1305 is a change to our procurement framework to allow for basically provide provisions in our terms and conditions and contracts that would essentially take our existing framework within our code using sort of a 1090 rule for our subcontractors. What it does is sort of picks up the design, build, and seam at risk codes in our current VPPA that says a general contractor shall not perform more than 10% of its work by its own forces. It provides that in regards to general contractors now, it says their subcontractors shall not basically perform more than 90%. It creates a 10 to 90 rule, and thereby by sort of having a permissive framework. Why 10%? Because we know there's going to be sort of subcontractors on jobs. It also provides a framework where the general contractor and sub can submit sort of multiple framework that exceeds the 10% rule, but there's sort of a check back with the project manager. Now, the question to the committee is why? Right? Why do we need this sort of framework? Why would we need terms and conditions? And I'd suggest that many of the members here worked on the General Assembly building and have probably noted that there's been wage theft on our own taxpayer jobs. In fact, one of the largest projects that the General Assembly has undertaken. Additionally, many of us drive by VCU and see sort of the protests out due to the same sort of provision that's occurring where you have multiple subs of subs of subs that are essentially under federal labor laws being directed and are essentially cheating out on the labor laws. The problem is in the terms and conditions of contracts, it becomes an enforcement of DOLE outside of the contract terms. And there's really nothing solid for a project manager to step up and say, contractor, you're not performing to the exact terms and conditions of our contract. This provides a flexible tool. If you've got multiple SWAMs or other things, there's plenty of flexibility to certify and identify from a project management standpoint. But I think it's really time to provide a tool. This was developed with collaboration of many project managers and folks in different procurement worlds to say, how do we add a tool to ensure that you as a project manager have something to go to the contractor with a cure notice or others. And so this is sort of started out with almost a dozen pages. This is consolidated to sort of a more simplified one-page tool that can be utilized. Madam Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions, but I think it is time. We've seen it in higher education. We've seen it in our own General Assembly building. We've seen it in local projects. And we need to ensure that there's a tool available versus waiting on an investigation from DOLE, which could take 3-6 months, a year. And by then, those taxpayer dollars have already been expended on the project, and there's very little recourse for the locality or state.
Thank you, Senator McPike. Do you have technical amendments for this?
I believe they were already adopted in the previous committee.
Okay.
Madam Chair, this is Connor from DLS, and Senator McPike, there is one additional technical amendment. There were amendments that were adopted in general laws, but there's one technical amendment we needed to be adopted by this committee.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Is there a motion?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded the technical amendment be agreed to. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. I see several people waiting to speak. First, Senator Peterson.
I'm sorry. Let me wait. I'm sorry, Madam.
Okay. Senator Edwards.
Who's asking for this, and what's the point of this? other than wage theft?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the
Yeah,
question?
Yeah. Who's asking for the bill? Where does it come from and why?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So this is asked for by many different groups, Leona, other folks that have seen this and have...
Who didn't hear you?
Folks in the labor community have been in strong support of this because of the identified issue of seeing, and also I circled back when I received some of the requests with project managers to figure out what's sort of the right tool. And the problem is there are multiple lawsuits that are occurring on state and local jobs, but the project managers don't have actually a tool to go to and say, hey, wait a second, this is clearly an issue and a moral imperative. We have our own taxpayer dollars benefiting contractors that are clearly cheating and clearly doing something wrong. And so it provides, frankly, somewhat of an eloquent element in the terms and conditions for folks to take a look at it.
Senator Newman.
Yes, Madam Chairman. Senator McPike, is it anticipated that this bill will apply to VDOT road projects? And if so, aren't they covered by Davis-Bacon and also have intense auditing requirements that they currently have, so you would know?
Madam Chair, the answer is yes. So this would also apply. And so because they already have Davis-Bacon, they wouldn't really have to utilize this project framework at all. But there are some road projects that do not apply Davis-Bacon that are solely state or other combined road money.
Senator Norman.
Madam Chairman, just because I happen to follow these things professionally, it's my understanding that the suits that you referenced on VCU and the General Assembly building really have not been litigated, and some of the parties have not even brought into the suit as of today. Is that correct?
I'm not sure of all the status, but I presume so.
Madam Chairman, would you agree that the legal issue has not been decided by a court?
Yeah, Madam Chair, the point I think that the Senator is bringing up is whether or not this legislation would interfere with litigation, and the answer is no.
Madam Chair, that was not my question. But the second part, I thought that some time ago that the Department of General Services had done a 5-year look back to determine whether or not there had been any wage fraud and that they had not found any. Do you have anything to the contrary on that?
Madam Chair, I don't have the report or the look back or the data that, however, the number of lawsuits filed indicate that it's still very much exists right now.
Madam Chair, I would say that between Senator Serville and Peterson and I, litigation is frequent. Thank you.
Senator Peterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I apologize, I was a little bit unprepared. I think my question is, Senator McPike, and I realize this is what you do for a living, but if we're adding a code section to 2.2, that applies to every municipality, every locality, correct?
That's correct.
So I guess my question is, why would we, any locality right now could do this if they wanted to, if you wanted to make this a portion of City of Alexandria or Prince William County or make this part of your requirements for contracting. Is there a reason to make it mandatory for all 168 localities?
So, Madam Chair, I'd respond that is not, I would not interpret the VPPA to be accurate to allow a provision of required of submissions as a base part of its terms and conditions. I think the VPPA is fairly clear in terms of sort of the literal interpretation of what is allowed in the framework and the construct.
Senator Ruff.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Senator McPike, is there any magic in the 10%? Yeah. If a project manager can control it at 10% or under, why not 20% or under?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I think I opened up in the introduction. I'm trying to mirror also the existing code within VPA under design, build, and CM at risk that already sort of sets out a 10/90 rule. In this case, it's flipping it because we're dealing with subcontractors. So it's clear that there will be subcontractors that are clearly, they could, have a very small shop or very specialty things like design controls or high pressure equipment. There's other various things that are quite specialized. It's very clear that require subcontractors. And so it's to create an ease of burden, frankly, that we don't necessarily have to see everything. But it's clearly that those are creating a framework of sort of stepping around the labor laws. What you'd find is a dozen or more, quote unquote, independent contractors under the subcontract terms. And so this is really picking up as a sort of an easier method to identify and flag where folks are really stepping around the law.
Madam Chairman.
Senator Ruff.
If the project manager has control, doesn't he have control?
Madam Chair, no. Right now, remember, when I contract with Ruff Inc., it is our contract, and a lot of times it's ITB, so it's fixed price, and you're going out through your own means and methods to secure the work, and however you pursue that. And as long as you conform and deliver the project in terms of the architectural construction documents and specifications, by our Procurement Act and our payment laws, the locality is required to pay out. When you start to, as a follow-up, Madam Chair, when you start to get into labor law violation, that becomes a purview of DOLE. And so your investigation, even though your job is moving on, could take 6 months, 8 months, a year, and many times your project might already be complete, even though they're clearly violating other sections of the law. By having this would actually provide an enforcement mechanism that one could issue a cure notice of a corrective action, and the contractor within 10 days would have an ability to say, yes, we're in conformance, or yes, we in fact have no issue, or yes, we do, and we're going to take corrective action to the subcontractor. That way it's sort of resolved within a reasonable time frame, and we're not paying out taxpayer dollars.
Madam Chairman, not
Senator Ruff.
with Senator McPike, couldn't the original contract with the locality establish that you will not do things that they don't want? Can it be written into the contract so that the project manager knows exactly what he has the authority to approve and not approve?
So the specifications in the VPPA provide a framework for that. Most of that is basically means and methods. Usually you do have issues around federal labor law. However, the problem becomes those are sort of DOLE enforceability issues in terms of the investigation. This is not what this is trying not to do, is to have the project manager take on the DOLE hat as a labor investigator. That's not what I'm intended to do. And that's what this does not do, because it's a different level of issue. But what it does do is provide a framework to say, we've been notified there is an issue. Contractor, tell us about it. Come back, because we have this clearly in our terms and conditions up front, and I think that's key, is to ensure that we do have them up front. If we're not telling people to do it, then that's the problem. You have nothing of enforceability.
Is there a motion on the bill? Oh, Senator Norman.
I apologize for my disjointed thoughts because this is not an area that I work in, and so I'm sort of rambling around mentally on this situation. But I know that we're not supposed to decide the policy, but can you tell me, did local governments oppose this in the previous committee?
Madam Chair, I'd respond, yes, some have. I've had some discussions with some of the procurement folks. Some of the folks have opposed at the state. Others in higher ed have not taken official position, but they've been struggling with the same issue and are interested in sort of this solution.
Is there a motion on the bill?
Move to report.
It's been moved and seconded the bill be reported. Please record your vote.
Ayes 9, no 6.
Ayes 9, no 6, the bill's reported. Senator McPike, you also have Senate Bill 1423, but I believe that's being put off, passed by for the day.
No, Madam Chair, I believe we're ready with the substitute.
Okay,
You want to take that up now?
sure. Yeah. Senator Rock.
I'm not sure that, but I think that the substitute for my bill and Senator McPike's bill should be the same at this point. If they are, I would like to roll my bill in with his and be listed as a co-chief sponsor.
So, yeah,
Been moved, and is there a second?
Second.
Seconded that Senator Ruff's bill be rolled into Senator McPike's bill, and he be listed as a co-chief patron. All in favor, record your vote aye. Opposed, no.
Ayes 15, no 0.
Ayes 15, no 0. The changes have been made.
and Madam Chair, I'd like to offer the substitute now to the committee and highlight a couple of those different elements about the bill.
Okay, is there a motion to adopt the substitute?
So moved.
Been moved and seconded the substitute be agreed to. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The bill before the committee highlights and takes on a number of different things from JLARC's recommendations from 2019 in regards to data centers. One of those JLARC recommendations was to provide a framework to reduce the number of job requirements as part of the data center. In this proposed substitute, we've reduced the job number to 15 and applied that to double distressed areas. And so once you look, and we've worked with VEDP to understand the framework of the maps of where this would help to apply new incentives. And the double distressed, as written in the substitute, would really focus on Southwest Virginia and South Side. There are some other spatterings based on the data and the maps. The substitute also freezes the data set to 2019 data. There are some changes and shifts based on COVID that occurred based on the 2020 data. So what we've done is put basically in a 2-year hold on the data based on 2019 data to ensure that sort of the unemployment and the different changes that occurred over the last year due to COVID don't necessarily impact. But we do a reset after 2 years, sort of back to the normal process, Madam Chair. The other major element of this bill is JLARC's recommendation in regards to collection of data, the total economic data. And so the substitute now incorporates, after collaboration with stakeholders and VEDP, the appropriate language that they feel they can gather the data without necessarily pinpointing one facility. And so the data would be aggregated, but the data would be collected to at least inform us as the General Assembly and VEDP on the economic development benefits, Madam Chair. So those are the elements of the bill, and happy to address any questions.
Are there questions for Senator McPike? Is there anyone in the public who's signed up to speak?
Yes, Madam Chair, we have Ellen Miller going first.
Okay. Ellen?
Hi, I'm Ellen Miller with JLARC. I'm really just here to address any questions that the members may have about our evaluation of the data center exemption and our findings, Madam Chairman.
Thank you.
Chairwoman.
Is there a member of the public signed up?
Will Payne.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Will Payne of Coalfield Strategies in Southwest Virginia, and speak in favor of the bill. Our team led a region-wide effort called Project Oasis over the last year and a half to identify potential data center sites based on industry standard power and broadband needs. The results are positive. It's fact-based, and the business case for multiple data centers is strong. In addition, Southwest Virginia can do something that no one else can do around sustainability in Virginia or around the world, and that's the use of geothermal cooling using mine pool water to be a significant cost savings tool. This will help us reinvent Southwest Virginia. It's a rare moment when we have both, or we have everyone on board, from state and local government to university and workforce development, our region's legislators, and private industry. A data center sited in Southwest Virginia is a game changer. An investment in one locality is good for the whole region. We believe this legislation, based on the JLARC recommendation, will give the region a critical missing tool it needs in order to close a deal. And only speaking to that portion of this bill and elements, I think, of Senator Ruff's bill that I believe were all incorporated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else?
Madam Chair, next we have Tag Greason.
Madam Chair, how you doing? Good morning. Can you hear me?
Good to see you, Tag.
Good to see you. Thank you so much. I've been watching your committee, and I appreciate what you guys are doing virtually and making things run on time. As it relates to this Senate Bill 1423, I, as you know, was working with Senator Ruff on Senate Bill 1425, and there was a substitute for that bill. I believe in Senator Ruff's motion earlier that he said if the substitutes were identical, then he would be okay to roll his bill into Senate Bill 1423. Unfortunately, I can't see the substitute that Senator McPike had just spoke to. And I do want to question, Madam Chair, are those two substitutes identical, or was there a different substitute proposed for Senate Bill 1425?
Senator Ruff's bill has been rolled into Senator McPike's bill.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Then I will speak to the substitute that is before you. In a previous discussion, we had talked about having the jobs requirements in the double distressed areas being reduced per the JLARC study, and the reporting requirement, which industry is fully supportive of. As you guys think about the incentive that is delivered to the data center industry, the reporting would allow you to see the benefit that is provided to the Commonwealth as well. So I applaud you for acting on that recommendation from JLARC. There was a discussion, Madam Chair, as it relates to the substitute that was being prepared for another Senate bill that is now rolled into Senate 1423, Senator Ruff's bill, and it contemplated an idea that there would be another 25 job requirement for counties that were not double distressed and that were not, i.e. Loudoun County. And Madam Chair, I'm just confused to understand if that requirement is in the substitute that Senator McPike just delivered to the Senate.
Connor, could you speak to that?
Madam Chair and Mr. Greason, I'm not sure I entirely understood the question, so if I don't answer it fully, please ask a follow-up. But Senator McPike's substitute has criteria for a distressed locality that are the same as is currently used for double distressed for Commonwealth's Opportunity Fund grants. So if it would meet those requirements, then the answer would be yes. I mean, if it would fit on that map, then the answer would be yes.
Madam Chair, I know that you guys are under a tight time frame. Am I authorized to ask a follow-up question, Madam Chair, that you might direct to Connor?
You're considerably over the public comment time, so the answer is no.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Is there anyone else?
Madam Chair, there's one more member of the public with their hands raised, Josh Levy.
Josh, you're up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Very briefly, I'm Josh Levy, representing the Data Center Coalition Trade Association for the industry. While 33 states now have the data center incentives in place, Virginia was an early leader in this regard and has been a catalyst in making Virginia home to the largest data center market in the world by far. All of our members have investment in the Commonwealth. We are one of the stakeholders referenced by Senator McPike and have been working with the bill sponsors and VEDP to develop the language to establish a workable framework for data collection and reporting. And we very much appreciate everybody's efforts in this regard, and I'm available to answer any questions.
Okay. Is there anyone else signed up?
No, Madam Chair, there's not.
Is there a motion on the bill? Senator Barker.
Yes, question, issue was raised with me regarding who would do the reporting on this and what the recommendation was from JLARC and whether the bill is consistent with that or has a different entity doing the reporting. I don't know whether someone from JLARC could answer that or Ellen from JLARC.
Ellen, did you hear the question?
Yes, ma'am, I did, Madam Chair. Again, Ellen Miller, JLARC. Our recommendation was to have the tax department issue the report on the fiscal impact of the data center exemption. The tax department was already collecting the information and has already over many years been asked to report that information. So there's already a process and structure there. We also thought it was reasonable for the tax department to do it. They are, an objective entity. Their purpose, really is to report on the fiscal impact of various tax policies on the state. So the data center exemption certainly falls into that. It's also very similar to other reports that they do. Think of the motion picture tax credit. They collect the information from the film office and report on that. So that's that was our recommendation and our rationale behind that.
Thank you.
All right, and is that what's in the bill or not?
So, Madam Chair,
Yes.
I would say that this section would need to be revised as an amendment to the substitute to add tax department, because I think Senator Barker is correct. There was part of dual reporting to VEDP and tax department, but who produces the report, I would consider it a friendly amendment if you wanted to shift or add that.
Do you want to add an amendment?
Yeah, make that motion.
Second.
The amendment's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Amendment's agreed to.
Madam Chair, this is Connor from DLS. I apologize for interrupting, but I just want to clarify what Senator Barker's amendment is. Would the amendment be to give the Department of Taxation primary jurisdiction over the report and VEDP collaborates with them, or would it be the other way around?
Yes, the tax would have a primary
Okay, thank you.
position on this. So.
Thank you, Senator Barker.
Madam
Yes, Senator Ruff.
Connor, since you're still there, before this goes to the floor, or as this goes to the floor, if you can compare the two bills and make sure that they were exactly the same so that we can work out anything necessary before a final vote.
Madam Chair, Senator Ruff, absolutely, I'll do that.
Thank you, Connor. Okay. We need a motion to report the substitute. Is there such a motion or a motion?
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded that the substitute be agreed to. Please record your vote. Be reported. Please record your vote.
Ayes 14, no 0.
Ayes 14, no 0. The bill's reported. Okay, I understand Senator Boysko is here, so we could go back to her bill. Senate Bill 1387.
Here too.
Oh, okay. I understand Senator Obenshain is here. If you'd like to do your bill, Senator. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you. I'm so sorry. Okay, Senator Boysko.
Madam Chair, thank you. I apologize for missing you all earlier. I was in a meeting with the League of Women Voters and didn't realize that I was being called in. I have an amendment in the nature of the substitute on SB 1387, which provides financial assistance for undocumented students.
Can I move the amendment in the nature of a substitute?
Is there a second?
Second.
The amendment in the nature of a substitute, please indicate if you support that, adopting that. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No. Okay. Okay. It's now before us.
Yes, ma'am, Madam Chair. The amendment fixes a piece of the code that was moved from one section to another and accidentally dropped a sentence. And so it basically just says that educational benefits including access to financial assistance programs administered by the council, the state board, or a public institution of higher education as any other individual who is eligible for in-state tuition pursuant to 23.1-502. In the session in 2020, we added language to the code to provide that a group of students who attend Virginia's high schools to be eligible for in-state tuition. As a result of the bill, many of our undocumented students are now able to attend college, but we know that even though they are eligible, they have not been eligible for state financial aid under the existing law. This legislation removes that restriction and establishes a program through SHEV that will make attending college a reality and more affordable. Equity across education for all Virginians means economic prosperity for the entire Commonwealth. Research shows that college education amounts to an increase of $1.2 million in lifetime earnings, and our Commonwealth's economy will benefit when we provide a path for undocumented students to earn a college degree in an affordable and equitable way. I've been working with the administration on this. This is a bill that they are supporting, and I ask that you pass it to the Senate floor.
Thank you, Senator. I have a question from staff. They believe that the substitute was adopted in the previous committee. It was? Okay, then we need to unadopt it. Okay. It's been moved and seconded that we not re-adopt a substitute. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Okay. Now on the bill itself, are there questions for Senator Boysko? Is there a motion on the bill?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that Senate Bill 1387 be reported. Please record your vote.
Ayes 11, noes 4.
Ayes 11, noes 4. The bill's reported. Thank you, Senator Boysko. Okay, I believe next up is Senator Obenshain. Senator, I think you have 3 bills before us.
Bill 1104 is first, I think.
1104.
Madam Chair, members of
I can't hear you.
Madam Chair. There we go.
That's better.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, this is the parole bill. This is the identical bill that passed with a broad bipartisan majority out during the special session, and House really didn't consider it. This is as redrafted with cooperation from Senator Surville. It is a bill that does really a couple of things. One, it simply clarifies whose obligation it is to make sure that all the boxes are checked before an inmate is released. There was some confusion earlier last year. This makes it clear that DOC, who controls the locks on the doors at the prison, is the one who has to check and make sure that the proper notifications have occurred and the timeframes respected before an inmate is released. That confusion that existed would be eliminated. It also adds a little bit of added transparency to the process. Senator Morrissey effectively argued on the floor that, if somebody served 40 years in prison, they deserve some consideration for release, and that kind of transparency by allowing or requiring the parole board to list how long somebody has served on the information that they already release is helpful. Also, it clarifies when the parole board is to publish its determinations, and clarifies that victims, it inserts some redundancy in providing that in addition to notifying victims, they also notify the victim witness coordinator and Commonwealth's Attorney's Office.
Senator, your bill passed this committee unanimously, passed the Senate unanimously, so I think it's in good shape.
Thank you.
It's been moved and seconded that Senate Bill 1104 be reported. Please record your vote.
He's incapacitated.
Senator Evans' machine isn't working.
Ayes 15, no 0.
Ayes 15, no 0. The bill is reported.
Madam Chair, second bill is Senate Bill 1125, which came out of Judiciary unanimously. This could probably have been part of the previous bill, but this simply requires notification of victims prior to the release of an inmate. This is broadly supported by victims' rights organizations like victims of sexual and domestic violence in particular, so that they have some advance notification before the perpetrator of their victimization is released into the community.
I'm very supportive of this bill from personal experience. When my father-in-law was murdered and his murderer was released by mistake from prison onto the streets of New York City instead of being deported to Norway, it was this kind of information that unscrambled a really horrible situation. So I don't like to editorialize, but I think this is important.
Madam Chair.
It's Senator Newman.
Madam Chair, Lynchburg just had a similar case. I won't recount it, but it has been the entire discussion of the community probably for the last month and a half. And the family is just in turmoil. So, Mark, I'm delighted you brought the bill, and there's no opposition. I would move the bill be reported.
It's been moved and seconded that Senate Bill 1125 be reported. Please record your vote.
Ayes 15, no 0.
Ayes 15, no 0. The bill is reported.
And Madam Chair, the third bill I have is Senate Bill 1193. This is a bill that was introduced at the request of and with cooperation with the dairy industry and agribusiness. The number of dairy farms in Virginia has precipitously dropped, even over the past 5 years, dropping from over 600 to about 400 dairy farms in Virginia. And one of the problems is pricing. Federal government has an insurance program for dairy producers to ensure price levels, and this would encourage participation in this process by paying a portion of Tier 1 coverage for dairy farms for participation in this price support program, but the obligation that they incur in exchange for this is that they must agree to participate in a nutrient management plan or resource management plan in order to be entitled to that assistance. We've very effectively gotten the ag industry to cooperate in cleaning up our waterways, and this is one additional way. And the way that this is drafted, it caps the potential maximum exposure to the Commonwealth, I believe, at about $1.5 million if it is fully utilized. It's a program that I believe passed out of the Senate last year, but in any event, it's a program that achieves those joint objectives of trying to slow the disappearance of the dairy industry and further our cooperative efforts to clean up our waterways in Virginia.
Thank you. Are there questions for the senator? This has been re-referred from another committee, so we won't take public comments. I am seeing that staff is suggesting that perhaps we should establish a fund and programmatic guidelines for such a bill.
Madam Chair, I would ask Jason to speak to that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In reviewing the bill, which is exactly like it did pass the Senate last year, as described accurately by Senator Obenshain, it is a by right refund. So irrespective of how much money is appropriated this year, funding for the reimbursement would have to be appropriated in VDAX's base budget every year in order to cover the participation. So the suggestion was to establish a fund just so that the ongoing exposure wasn't there and make it a first come, first served basis. But again, merely a staff suggestion.
Senator Obenshain, do you have an opinion on that?
I don't have an objection. Any help with the dairy industry would be greatly appreciated.
Could we adopt in concept?
I'll make a motion that we adopt in concept the amendment suggested by Jason.
Okay, thank you. It's been moved and seconded that we adopt the amendment in concept, and we'll then see it on the floor. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Is there the ayes have it. Is there a motion on the bill?
Madam Chair,
Report is amended.
Senator Hanger.
it appears we may need to attach the clause again. There's a budget amendment in, but I'm not sure of the interrelationship of establishing the fund and the appropriation. Do we need the clause?
April.
Jason, did you want to speak to whether it was in the introduced budget?
Madam Chair, Senator Hanger, it is not included in the introduced budget. Senator Obenshain does have a budget amendment to establish the program. The fizz on the bill from last year pegged the number around 2, but as the senator observes, the number of dairy farms is fading. So I can't with certainty say that the 1.5 would cover it, but to the question of the clause, it wouldn't be necessary if you were just establishing the fund on the books. It would be necessary if you wanted to, start the program.
Funding.
And I'm assuming Senator Obenshain would like it to be funded.
It would certainly help. Without it, there's no incentive to engage in the nutrient management plans.
Madam Chair, I do support funding the program, so I would move that we attach the clause and try to come up with a little bit of money.
It's been moved. Is there a second? Okay, it's been moved and seconded. We attach the clause. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay.
Move the report is amended.
Is there a second? It's been moved to report Senate Bill 1193 as amended. Please record your vote.
It's not reported. Can I be reported as aye?
Yes, Senator. Oh.
Thank you.
Senator Norm. Yeah.
Ayes 15, no 0.
Ayes 15, no 0. The bill's reported.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Next up is Senator Pillion with Senate Bill 1402. Oh, okay. Okay.
This is really heavy stuff. Madam Chair.
Yes, Senator Pillion.
Senate Bill 1402 is an agency bill that would allow 5-day trip fishing licenses to be sold by DWR to be used for fishing trout in the Commonwealth. So this isn't currently an option. It's an option for non-residents, but not for residents. So we're opening it up to Virginia residents to save them some money.
Thank you. It turns out there's no fiscal impact, is what we're
That's correct. But I'm here.
Move to
Thank
report.
you. It's been moved and seconded that Senate Bill 1402 be reported. Please record your vote.
Could I be recorded, have been recorded as aye?
Yes, Senator. Ayes 15, no 0.
Ayes 15, no 0. This bill's reported. Okay. Next up is Senator Reeves with Senate Bill 1119. Is Senator Reeves?
Madam Chair, Senator Reeves is on the Zoom.
Great, okay.
Senator Reeves, please go ahead. Madam Chair, he is on the Zoom, but his camera is turned off, so I'm not sure if he's around.
Turn it on.
This bill has no general fund impact, and we reported the identical bill previously, and it passed the Senate 35-0. So if anybody would like to make a motion
All
on
it does is, yes.
It's been moved and seconded that Senate Bill 1119 be reported. All in favor, record your vote aye.
Ayes 15, no 0.
Ayes 15, no 0. The bill's reported. Next up is Senator Stanley. Senate Bill 1106. Senator Stanley.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I have two bills before you. I don't know if we can maybe take this up just in the order in which they were filed, 1106, if that's all right,
Yes, that's
Madam
fine.
Chair.
That's fine.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, 1106 is a creation of a fund which this committee once last year passed out with the clause I like to refer to the clause now as the Talon, just sounds a little more fierce. But the bill itself is quite simple. Senator Marsden, myself, Senator McClellan, we had a task force where we went around and looked at the schools that were falling apart, that were crumbling, that needed repair and modernization, and we found one commonality, and that was that the roofs themselves were the main source of the problem. A lot of the schools were flat-top roofs. The water and condensation was getting into the area. It was affecting the HVAC systems, the plumbing systems, the electronics, the electric, and then it was coming down in through the ceiling tiles and sogging the ceiling tiles, and there would be water. And we saw even schools where there would be buckets in classrooms where the kids had to be moved, 30 or 40 of them, to collect the rainwater. The smell of mildew and mold was pervasive in these schools. And so what we try to do here is address that by, excuse me, creating a fund, which could be from private, public, and appropriated monies and local matches, which would then create a roofs fund. And that from that, we would be able to disperse monies for not just the repair, but mostly the replacement. What they're doing right now is they're patching these roofs, and it's just putting a Band-Aid on a gaping head wound, not solving the problem. We think it's the first step of trying to stop the degrading of these schools, and then to give us the second step, which would be modernization. It would be administered by the Virginia Department of Education, and the disbursement of the monies would be based on need, ranked on a first-come basis. And that's the bill, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. The questions for Senator Stanley?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Madam Chair, I have an amendment which I discussed with Senator Stanley before, and that is, as the bill is written, funds from the grant funds can only be used for grants for replacing or repairing roofs or roofs. I'm not sure exactly how you say that, but
roofs.
Roofs. But as Senator Stanley mentioned, once you have a leaking roof, it also can lead to mold in the tiles, and that couldn't be addressed through this fund. And also in some localities, and Charles City County is one of them, what keeps the superintendent up at night is not necessarily the roof, but what happens if the HVAC system goes out, because that would be just as expensive, if not more, than to repair a roof. So I would like to propose that we, I'm not exactly sure the wording of it, maybe staff can help, but on lines 27 and 28, open this up a little bit for any repair and maintenance project, or, yeah, he's shaking his head at that, so yeah.
No, Madam Chair, I mean, and I didn't know that I'd need to respond, but I've always enjoyed working on this issue with Senator McClellan. She's taken the lead on this issue on your side of the party, and I always appreciate her input. If this committee believes that we should not just limit it to roofs, and with Senator Marsden, who's the chief co-patron, with his approval, then we're all for expanding it. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is repair these schools so that every child has an opportunity and an equal education, and that they're working and learning in a modern facility, thereby giving the tools to the teachers, putting those tools in the toolbox to make sure we're creating a great workforce. So whatever Senator McClellan is proposing, even in theory, is not something that I'm against.
Would you like to make that amendment?
Yes, but I may need to work with staff on the exact wording. But the idea would be that it could be repairing or replacing the roof or any other repair or maintenance project on the building or its systems.
Mr. Chairman, how about this? Just simply
Senator Edwards?
Just deleting the words, it says repairing or replacing, strike out the roofs of. So it's repairing or replacing public elementary school buildings.
Staff, do you have an amendment?
Madam Chair, this is Connor from DLS. I think that with the language that Senator Edwards was proposing, it might expand it more broadly than what I heard Senator McClellan and Senator Stanley describing, in the sense that if you allow it for repair or replacement of any public or elementary and secondary school building, that could be sort of any capital improvement to the building whatsoever. But if you'd like, I can work with Senator Stanley and Senator McClellan on sort of keeping it narrowly focused on not just roof repairs, but any sort of repair to the electrical equipment or something like that that was damaged as a result of a defective roof.
Is that okay, Senator Stanley?
It is with me, as long as it is with Senator McClellan.
Okay.
Yes.
So let's adopt the.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Quick question for the patron and or Senator McClellan. The only thing I would be a little bit concerned about is the fact that somebody decides to gamble on another roof repair that may or may not work and then do the subsequent repair down below of some damage that's been done. Is that of any concern to you?
Madam Chair?
Senator McClellan.
As someone who's had to deal with a leaking roof, typically a contractor will not do repairs on the inside until the source of the leak is fixed. So I don't think that's an issue we need to worry about.
Good answer. Thank you.
Okay, so we have an amendment in concept, and I believe we have a motion to adopt that amendment in concept. So all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. And now the bills before us. Yes.
We have got to get started with this. We can't fund everything, but we have got to make this a legitimate fund that gets this thing started. We've been on tours of these schools. It's absolutely horrible what these children are exposed to, and that's just a pitch for it. But I move that the bill be reported.
It's been moved and seconded that Senate Bill 1106 be reported.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Senator Deeds. I'm sorry, I had.
If we're going to put real money behind this, don't we need a cause on this bill when we report it? And and if we are going to put real money behind this, we need to think about how we're going to raise that real money. And we need to quit talking about issues we're not prepared to support. And something like this is critically important to the communities I represent. And they get excited every time they hear anybody talking about it. But when it doesn't include money, we are just dancing around on the head of a pin. We're not doing anything.
So I would welcome a motion to put what Senator Stanley calls the Talon on this bill.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Senator McClellan.
Speaking of that motion, I agree if we're going to really effectively do this, we're going to need to appropriate some money. But I would just note that what this bill is doing is setting up the actual fund itself and the framework, which could also be used not just for appropriations, but as a holding place for gifts, donations, grants, requests, or other funds received. So I don't know that we necessarily need to fund it through the budget to pass this bill. We should, but I don't think I don't think we need the clause because there are other sources of money. What we could do, and we've done with another fund, I think, is say if there's no money appropriated after a certain amount of time, maybe the fund sunsets or if there's no money in it. But I think we need to at least get the fund in place now.
Madam Chair.
Senator Deeds.
I would like to ask Senator McClellan how many funds we've created where we've been able to get people to just give us money for.
Madam Chair, I would answer there is a fund for the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Commission that was established years ago that does receive grants and donations, et cetera, for some of its works. That's part of how we're funding the Emancipation Proclamation. That's the one I know off the top of my head. I'd have to defer to Legislative Services on whether there are any other ones.
Senator Edwards, then Senator Newman.
I was suggesting that maybe we could convince Bezos of Amazon, he's got plenty of money, as part of his project in Northern Virginia to build some schools. How's that?
Madam Chair.
Perhaps he's watching our meeting.
They're watching everything, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I would agree with the gentleman, and I think part of the fund and what Senator McClellan and Senator Marsden and I are talking about here is that we envision, because the vast majority of our students that come through our K-12 public school system do not go on to college. So what you're doing is creating the workforce, and what we have to have is that 21st century workforce. So what we envision is really when it allows private monies, public monies, and local matches, is that what we can try to do in promoting this fund is to get those industries located in those areas to put some skin in the game, because what they're doing in repairing and modernizing those schools are creating the workforce pipeline that they want, that will make their businesses successful, even more successful and sustainable.
I would ask the clerk, have we voted on the clause amendment?
I don't believe that we voted on the clause amendment.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Senator Newman.
Madam Chair, I just want to speak a little bit against the clause, and here's why. Those of you that serve on the Public Education Subcommittee will remember that either last year or maybe it was the year before, we actually had some school construction money, right? And we were going to put it, and we actually put it into our budget. It didn't make it through on the other side. But the fact is we didn't have a fund to put it in, right? So we would have to create in the budget the structure. And so it seems to me that this has a lot of structure. And if that opportunity comes up again, especially for one-time funding, it would be an opportunity to have a structure that we could put the money into instead of reinventing the wheel inside the budget. So that's my hope, Madam Chair.
So is there a motion on the floor about the clause that we need to have rescinded, or?
Madam Chair, I make a substitute motion bill would be reported.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded that the substitute motion that the bill be reported. Please record your vote.
Yeah, hold on a second. Why am I not? Can you put me as abstain on that?
Yes, Senator.
Thank you.
Ayes 14, no 0, 1 abstention.
Ayes 14, no 0, 1 abstention. Senator Stanley, you have one more bill, and that will be our final bill.
And thank you, Madam Chair. This is the first time.
Except for one thing I need for Senator Ruff.
This is the first time I've ever gotten a bill out without the clause of the finance. This is like Christmas. So I may just rest on my laurels. Madam Chair, the next bill, the final bill that I have before you today is Senate Bill 1108, dealing with general district courts. At the time, we have a current civil limit of $25,000. This bill seeks to increase that limit from $25,000 to $50,000 in matters of personal property loss, personal injury, and wrongful death. Ladies and gentlemen, I think I read a letter somewhere where our Chief Justice said that last year we continued over 135,000 cases currently pending in the circuit court. That is a backlog, it doesn't stop the number of cases that are continuing to be filed, but we have such an incredible backlog in the circuit court that...
Madam Chair.
Yes. Senator Peterson.
If I might make a friendly amendment, and we heard this in courts, but would you be willing to take out the personal property and just leave it at personal injury cases?
Personal injury and wrongful death?
Yes, sir.
Sure. I mean...
If you want me to vote for it.
Raise your hand if you're going to vote for it already, and I'll see if I like the amendment. That's 2. I'm going to need you. Yeah, then okay. Put it in. That's fine for me.
I would make that amendment that we, Madam Chair, we take out personal property and just make it personal injury and wrongful death.
Is there a second to the amendment? It's been moved. The amendment's been moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Amendment's
Chair,
agreed to.
I have a question. Is wrongful death in here?
Yes.
Yes.
In the substitute, yes.
Okay. I don't have a substitute.
Substitute, not in the original form. The original form would have been a broader $50,000 jurisdictional limit across the board. Right now, we're just, in these instances, we can create some relief for the overclogging of our circuit courts. Quite frankly, it allows more access to those persons that may not be able to afford an attorney. General district court can also, not only you can be represented, you can always be pro se in both courts, but I think it gives more access to those at lower income levels to seek redress.
Madam Chair.
It's a more efficient system.
Since time is short, may I make a motion?
Yes.
I would move we report this bill. I note that we moved up the minimum limits on personal injury case in auto cases up to $50,000. So this would match that $50,000. In other words, the minimum policy limits. And this would be strictly personal injury cases. So this has been dialed way back. but I do believe it opens the courthouse door, particularly for personal injury plaintiffs who cannot get in front of a judge right now. So I would move that we report the bill.
Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded that Senate Bill 1108 be reported. Please record your vote. It's your lucky day.
I know.
Ayes 14, noes 1.
Ayes 14, noes 1. The bill's reported.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's always great to be in front of the committee, especially like this. So I appreciate it.
I'm going to change my mind on something. I realize that Senator Suderline is here, and he's the only non-member of the committee with remaining bills. So let's hear Senator Suderline's bill.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. The bill I have before you today is Senate Bill 1103. It provides that the individual votes on the parole board shall be made public. This is identical to the bill that you all favorably acted on during the special session, and we got passed by the full Senate with a supermajority. I, like a lot of people that come before you, disagree with the fiscal impact statement, but even with the fiscal impact statement that's present, the Department of Corrections says that they could handle any additional costs, absorb it through their current funding.
Thank you, Senator. Are there questions for Senator Suderline?
Madam Chair, move to report.
It's been moved and seconded that Senate Bill 1103 be reported. Please record your vote.
Ayes 12, noes 3.
Ayes 12, noes 3. The bill's reported.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Ruff, you had a motion.
Earlier, we had, I was been led to believe that Senator McPike's bill and mine, 1425, were identical. We're going to try to work it out on the floor, but in case we can't, I would ask that be the motion to roll it into his be reversed and left in the committee.
Move to reconsider the motion by which we rolled that bill together.
Second.
Seconded, we reconsider the vote. All in favor, record your vote.
Proxy vote from Marsden. Senator McClellan. Ayes 15, no 0.
Ayes 15, no 0. And Senator Ruff, you have it, then the motion.
Madam Chair, having voted on the prevailing side by which we reported Senator Suderline's bill, I voted incorrectly one of the votes I was supposed to cast.
Can we just finish what we're doing with Senator Ruff?
Sorry, I thought we were finished.
Madam Chairman, could we carry Senate Bill 1425 over until next week?
Okay. Without objection. Okay. Senator McClellan.
Yes, sorry. Having voted on the prevailing side by which we reported, or can I just tell? Okay, never mind.
Yeah, I think that,
Give me 1 second.
I think we have to revote.
I think we do, but he's going to get a procedural.
Okay.
Okay. Is there any problem with doing it. Yeah.
We'll just go ahead and do it.
I would welcome a motion to report Senator McPike's bill.
No, we need to reconsider the vote.
You would need to
First motion, I think,
reconsider.
needs to be, we need to reconsider the vote to report Senator McPike's bill.
Okay, there's a motion to reconsider the vote by which we reported.
Madam Chair, that's me.
I can hear him.
Madam Chair,
Oh.
can you give me 1 second, please?
Yes.
Some procedural questions. They unload Russ bill from the bill that they incorporated. Is there any issue? Yes.
It's not going to harm anything.
Is there any issue with
Yeah, it's not going to harm anything just to go through the process.
I know, it's just time.
Yeah. I mean, we're certainly not prohibited from doing it, so.
Yes. And then do what? Okay.
Should we just?
Yes, ma'am. You can reconsider the vote, Senator McPike's vote. You
All
can,
right.
and remove the sub, if that's what you'd like to do.
Yes, is there a motion?
I move.
It's been moved and seconded
To reconsider the vote.
to reconsider the vote by which we pass Senator McPike's bill.
Yes.
Okay, all in favor, record your vote.
You there?
Right.
Okay, the
Ayes 14, no 0.
ayes 14, no 0, the bill will be the vote will be reconsidered.
Now, we need to vote to approve, to report Senator McPike's bill with this removal of the incorporation of Senator Russ' bill.
Okay, is there a second? Okay. The motion is to report Senator McPike's bill with Senator Ruff's been removed.
Having been removed.
Has been, right. All in favor, please record your vote, please.
Ayes 15, no 0.
Ayes 15, noes 0. Motion passes. Is there any further business to come before this committee?
No.
Hearing none, we will stand.